Okay, and we're live here. I just want to turn on one more light back here. All right, so yeah, it's pretty bright here. Okay, so you guys let me know in the comments if you can't hear me. I'm trying a whole different setup here. Again, trying to get better audio for you. I was looking at the old videos that we were doing, and audio is a little bad, right? So trying a new microphone today, and hopefully you can hear me loud and clear. So if you could go ahead and let me know in the comments whether or not you can hear me okay, because I like. Hello, hey Robbie, can you hear me all right? Does the sound okay? Just give me a message here. So okay, great. All right, so we're going to keep on going then with today's lesson. I'm actually going to be reading a little bit a little bit from Farmer Burns here. So this is the book that I want you to see here. So this is the life work of Farmer Burns. So I've been doing a few different videos about it for a while, but also I kind of want to keep doing it because a lot of people don't have access to this book, and so it's got a lot of gems in here, and the way it was written, it wasn't necessarily written like just by Farmer Burns alone. He spoke with an editor, and so then the editor compiled a lot of his talks and some of his like but a lot of his philosophy and stuff like that. But I think it's really fascinating because it shows kind of like the scientific mind of Farmer Burns, which I think you guys might like. I think in this particular chapter, I want to go over the first chapter of the book, um, because at this time when it was written, let me see if I can pull up the date here, the year, right? Let me see, 1911. Okay, so from 1911, Farmer Burns, just in this first chapter alone, along with his editor, they compile some pretty interesting citations of their claims about like mental health, or even like the way our feelings like affect our bodies and the way our bodies function, right? So I kind of want to share these with you because this is also stuff that has become more understood as the decades have gone by. So I'll try to explain some of the science about it because I can, right? I have a medical license and all that. So just in case if you're wondering, so I'll try to explain it as best as I can, and but that's why I kind of want to share it with you because I think it's fascinating that something from 1911 is showing that or basically it's validated and or has gotten a lot of validation throughout the years. Right? So before we go on, Gustavo Ramirez, I have to say hello to you. Thank you for watching. You're all the way in Mexico. Really appreciate you watching, and we have the same last name, so um, I bet we're related. Who knows? Maybe, maybe. All right. So the first chapter is called "The Optimist Controlled World of Today." Right, and so in it, um, well, let's try to get into it. Right, so it's like um, this is what they're saying. Like today, so I'm reading from the book now. So today we find the greater part of the civilized world controlled by men looking on the brighter side of life. Especially, this is true of our own country. On every side, we find the prominent positions occupied by optimists, some of whom were born so, others who were bred so, and others who were shocked into this happy condition. Therefore, we believe that optimism is one of the essentials of success. Without a great display of logic to prove it. But so since they don't necessarily have like the science quite yet, or it's not necessarily worked out quite yet, um, they are going to cite some articles to kind of build their case. But what they're trying to say too, and it kind of goes on a little bit later about talking about doctors and patients, and that actually does have more science nowadays. right? So basically, he's saying like, if you have the doctor like with good bedside manner, and that kind of is like more encouraging, really makes you feel comfortable and taken care of, then that there's a higher chance that you're going to get better with that doctor, right? Regardless of what treatment he gives you, you'll probably be more compliant with whatever medication he prescribes and whatnot. So that's kind of what he's saying here in this book, because of the whole idea of feeling optimistic, right? So let me see if I can. Then he says, if you have such a physician, never desert him. He will prove himself worth more to you and your family than you or your family can ever pay him in money, right? So nowadays we talk about the placebo effect, right? So placebo is when you give the patient something that doesn't have a medicinal quality, and you see how many patients get better just off of, a lot of times it's like a sugar pill, or we call it sugar pill, right? But this you can use all types of placebos, right? Stuff that should have no medicinal effect on a person, and then you see which ones get better, or how large of a percentage gets better, as opposed to people who get no treatment, or people who get the drug or whatever kind of modality you're trying to use to cure some kind of problem. So this is what researchers use to try to prove the benefit of a certain substance or therapy, or any kind of thing, to then later get it onto the market, to and have it be labeled as effective, more effective than a placebo, right? So with that being said, let me kind of give you some more modern update about the placebo effect, because there is a lot of research that has been done on the placebo effect. And so it turns out that the placebo effect is like part of every treatment that you get, right? So much so that it is considered, statistically speaking, 20% of all therapies, right? So one of the big researchers actually came out of the world of acupuncture. That's why I know a lot about this, because a lot of people try to claim that acupuncture is a placebo, and it has no medical quality or no medical effectiveness, even though universities around the world, including the United States, has done a lot of research proving the effectiveness. So unfortunately, the whole idea that acupuncture is a placebo still lingers, right? And I think that's because of, like, say, maybe some market competition or whatever. Um, but anyway, so a big acupuncturist became a big time researcher in the placebo effect, and so his research is published and stuff. So basically, it came out to saying that no matter what type of modality you do, if you feel comfortable with it, right, that's an additional 20% benefit to you, right? So that adds like positivity to the outcome, right? So I know we're not talking about wrestling so much right now, but I'm trying to give you this idea where, to show you the power of optimism. All right, so in this case, that's what Farmer Burns is talking about. He's calling it optimism, right? But then later he talks about how. Okay, so let's go ahead and just read to you. So, we believe that the educational systems of the day should embrace proper physical as well as mental training. For with physical training comes confidence in a man's own ability to overcome and achieve. And the confidence is the most important weapon against a man's greatest enemy, fear, right? So we've heard that over the years, right? So fear is our greatest enemy, or fear is uh, what we have to fear, right? We have nothing to fear but fear itself, right? So Farmer Burns definitely agrees with this, and they actually cite a doctor. So Dr. Henry S. Monroe, in his handbook, the Handbook of Suggestive Therapeutics, uh, they claim here that he's one recognized as um, by the best physicians in America, by being one of the most practical of medical men in the country today. And in his handbook, he says, whatever impulse dominates the individual, whether fear, worry, or anxiety, envy, anger, jealousy, love, or purely animal passions, makes its appeal to and impress on the involuntary nervous system, right? So at this time, they were discovering more about the types of nervous systems that we have, right? So we ultimately have one nerve system, right? But it gets controlled over or by different things because we can't consciously be telling our heart to beat or or our organs to function or like our intestines to digest and stuff. So we have a lot of things that happen without us being conscious of it, right? And that's very important. Otherwise, it's like too much for us to be thinking about all the time, right? Because we have to live our lives, right? So that's why they're talking about the involuntary nervous system. So put simply, they say involuntary nervous system. Right now, nowadays, you probably heard a lot about fight or flight or the sympathetic nervous system or parasympathetic nervous system. So fight or flight is when we say like the sympathetic nervous system is taking control of a lot of the automatic stuff that happens in our body, right? But they go on. So this Dr. Monroe, goes on. Says we all have noticed that the functions of the different organs of the body are greatly disturbed through emotional influences. Sorrow brings tears to the eyes. Prolonged grief interferes with the secretions of gastric juice by the stomach. Of all emotional conditions which are most detrimental, however, fear, which is the opposite emotions to self reliance and self confidence, is the worst. Fear is the natural accompaniment of weakness, ignorance, and disease. Fear of sickness, fear of death, fear of failure, fear of anything of any nature is detrimental to all physiological processes. We invite what we fear. So fear weakens our resistive power of disease, right? So um, I kind of want to mention something. I don't know if those of you who follow any of these medical stuff. So I don't know if this too dense already, but I'm just gonna talk about it anyway, right? Uh, so the whole idea about fear, uh, like prolonged grief interferes with the secretions of gastric juices by the stomach. We found out that that is actually the to be true, right? So right now you might still find some doctors that talk about like, oh well, there was some researchers. There's actually a pretty famous case where you had a couple researchers they tried to disprove the whole idea of emotions affecting our digestive system because a lot of times it was kind of like what people believe. They would say like, oh, you got too much stress, that's why you develop an ulcer, right? But then some researchers try to say, oh no, it has nothing to do with the way you perceive the world. It's all about maybe what you intake. And so then there was a famous incident where researchers they what they called like pond water or whatever. They made like this nasty concoction of tons of bacteria and stuff, and they drank it, and of course they got inflammation or gastritis. That's what we call it, right? And then they try to prove that it has nothing to do with your emotions, right? And so then for a while, now when people get gastritis, maybe sometimes they'll show that they can find bacteria called H. pylori in your digestive system, right? And then they say it's all to do with that, right? It's nothing to do with your stress or whatever. Even though life is quite stressful for many people, now we're kind of shifting back away from that idea because it turns out that basically half of the population of the planet have H. pylori in our bodies anyway, and they don't have ulcers, right? And they don't necessarily create the problems that we were or that the researchers were trying to associate with it, right? But what we are finding is that the way we perceive the world does affect even the production of our gastric mucus. So like our stomach has a lot of acid in it, and so then the lining of our stomach has to have mucus on it to protect it from getting burned, right? So the more stressed out we are, the less the mucus is produced, and the more acid is produced, right? So you can develop these these ulcers because of stress, prolonged stress, not just necessarily like a big bout of stress or depends. Usually, if something happens all of a sudden, um, if you develop an ulcer suddenly, it probably was developing over time, and whatever extra bout of stress probably made it so you noticed it, right? Um, so yeah, these things develop over time, but the way we perceive the world affects hormone secretions. Um, Kind of one of the main things that you might hear a lot about is cortisol, and so then a lot of people are worried about having extra weight around their waist, and so that is uh, uh, affected by stress. So like the more stress you have, the more cortisol you have circulating, and the more of a spare tire you might have around your waist. So these things directly affect us. So the way we perceive the world directly affects us. So Farmer Burns and his editor understood these things, right? So that's why he's talking about when people not only do they need to exercise their body, like go outside, like Farmer Burns and other chapters, he talks about, everyone should work out or at least be outside and go run 10 miles a day, or be outside for a few hours at least every day. So when he's uh, saying that stuff, he also talks about you got to train your mind as well as your body, and that's kind of what he said earlier. So let's go ahead and move on a little bit, and because what they do next is kind of give an idea of the power of fear, and so I might as well kind of show you this. So what they do is they cite this other story, right? So I'll go ahead and just read it to you now. In the Century magazine for December 1899, R.R. Boker gives the following translation of an Arabic legend, which goes as follows, right? The spirit of the plague entered the gate. One watching asked, "How many wilt thou slay?" "1,000," spake the spirit, "is my quest." The plague made end. The spirit left the gate. The watcher cried, 10,000 didst thou slay? Nay, one, the spirit said. Fear killed the rest. So I don't know if you guys understood that, but basically, uh, he only killed one person, but everyone else's fear, killed them. So he didn't have to do anything but kill one, right? So I want to kind of skip over to this paragraph towards the end of the actually these two paragraphs towards the end of the chapter. Okay, so again, so now this is Farmer Burns. This is not from him citing any other article, right? So knowing as we do that confidence is the result of experience, we believe that our system of training the young should be improved to embrace a more comprehensive system of physical training, and that men today should recognize that the body should be developed and trained to do the bidding of the mind. For it stands to reason that a healthful and well developed mind should hold forth in the healthful and well developed body. So basically, the better you treat your body, the more it can support your mind, and the better you treat your mind, the better it can control a healthy body, right? So um, that's kind of one of the things he's talking about. And then I kind of want to add a little bit more. So basically, the next paragraph, right? So all men look forward to the acquiring of success and wealth. Feeling these two things bring a full measure of happiness, but there are very few who are far-sighted enough to foresee the results of years of work without the proper amount of diversion. They treat themselves with less consideration than they do the machinery of their power plants. The older they become, the less they think of diversions out of doors, and the result is that few of our successful businessmen see more than 50 years of life, after which age they could be in a position to do more and enjoy life to a greater extent if they only had obeyed the requirements of nature when placing their life's foundation stones, right? So no matter what age you are, you've got to be training, right? So training your body doesn't have to be wrestling, but um, you have to be active. You have to be using your body. You have to be at least walking, or then also beyond that, you have to be training your mind, right? For uh, to be resilient against fear, right? So then it's kind of what he's saying is like the like say if you want to be good at wrestling, the more you're training at it, right, the more confidence you can develop, right? But you also got to be training the mind outside of that that physical confidence that you develop. You also have to be training the mind. I would say even like to be understanding of other types of uh, things, like so maybe learn about economics, learn another language, learn about other cultures, different things like that. It gives you a better perspective of or a better, a more flexible mind, right? So that then you can better control your body. That's kind of one of the things that also happens in Eastern philosophy as well. They talk about like your mind being like they say like they give multiple examples, but like your mind being the conductor of the orchestra, right? So the better understanding you have of whatever subject, um, so it could be, say, like in this case, we're talking about wrestling. You know a certain amount of techniques, but you might not know everything, right? You're never gonna know everything, but if you know the ins and outs of your techniques, then you can apply it well in an adverse situation, right? You can still pull it out. You can still make it work, right? If the situation doesn't quite work, or if they don't attack you just the right way, right? Like they always show in comedies where it's like grab my hand. I know a technique, and they're like they grab the hand, and then they're like, oh no, no, grab me with your other hand because I only know it that way. So it's kind of where this kind of applies, where it's like you gotta necessarily know your technique, kind of the ins and outs, right? Especially with catch wrestling, you have to. So you gotta understand that figure four position to make sure that your double wrist lock works, right? So people aren't always just yanking their arms out and you don't have anything, right? You gotta understand how you can kind of continue to roll with it once you've got it, right? So that requires the training, but also the whole mental understanding of of the move. But plus, I think Farmer Burns would be talking about like additional outside measures. So I think that's kind of what's going on nowadays. I think people do have to kind of uh, not be so fearful, right? So it doesn't necessarily apply because I think a lot of times people who are the most fearful. A lot of times they kind of uh, they're not relaxed, right? A lot of times, sometimes you go online, you see a lot of angry people yelling, or, in all caps and stuff, uh, talking about being aggressive and making threats to each other. A lot of times, that's not the relaxed person. That's actually a fearful person, right? So they're trying to look at like cats, right? They're animals. They try to make themselves look bigger. That's that, right? So when you see someone trying to act real tough, right, and even in your martial art, right, if they're a higher belt and this, but they're making threats of people, a lot that's coming from a place of fear. And so Farmer Burns would encourage that person, like, look, you've already got a lot of hours of mat time, a lot of training, or you're training the body, but now you gotta fortify that mind, right, so that you're not so fearful, so you can just chill out and relax, right? So that's kind of the mind you want to be going for, not the fearful, stressed out mind that's scared of its own shadow, but the more relaxed mind that can more easily control a healthy, fit body. Right. So I really wanted to share that with you. I think that because it's important, especially for uh, succeeding in whatever sport you want to do, whether it be wrestling or something else, but also longevity in the sport, right? So if you're tense all the time, you might overtrain, or you might not understand when to get out of danger, and then you get injured, right? So it's really easy to hyperextend anything or tear some muscles or whatever. So um, the training, right? So the physical workout, the stretching, and then the mental workout, the mental stretching, right, is what can really give you that longevity and success, right? So kind of wrapping it all up and kind of packaging it so you guys can understand. let me know if any of you guys watching. I mean, what do you guys think of that, or do you guys have any questions? Because that's kind of it in a nutshell. I was thinking about maybe going over some of the more interesting chapters in his book, especially since this book is not so readily available. I think I saw a copy for over $100 or something on Amazon. Um, so it's kind of I think this has some really good lessons that aren't so easily available. So at least they're interesting to me, and I thought I'd share some of the modern research about it. So because I think it's so cool that he's talking about stuff that's really relevant today, and this was released back in what 1911, right? So ask me any of the or comments. You guys like it? Could you even hear me? We're using a new microphone today, so trying to make sure that the sound is clear. Um, so no question. There are a bunch of you guys watching, so say something. Hopefully you guys liked all that because I thought it was a really good compilation of different resources. So they mentioned a few like doctors, and also some philosophy, with some Arabic stories. Right, there wasn't that Arabic phobia that we got going around nowadays. Right, Farmer Burns writes often about like all different types of cultures and stuff. Um, uh, so I'll try to bring some more examples in his book and stuff because he was really a curious person. So I think it shows in his longevity in the sport because he was very healthy even after age 50. So um, that's kind of the mentality you want to have, right? Train the body, train the mind. Okay, so everyone's scared to ask questions today. That's cool. That's good. So thank you for listening. I think what we'll do is we'll kind of have. I'll go ahead and list some stuff. Oh, somebody asked a question, right? So Nadil Khan, what lineage are you in your wrestling? And do you allow chokes in your system? Right. So in in professional catch wrestling competition, there were no chokes, right? So there or chokes were barred. So it doesn't mean that people didn't know chokes, right? You can find chokes in all the old books, but again, they even say that chokes were barred in competition, right? So and they've been barred in catch wrestling since the mid 1800s, right? So nowadays you have people trying to claim that like, oh, it was whatever tragedy that, or it was like some sort of conspiracy. It's like no, it wasn't, and they take a lot of stuff out of context and stuff. So anyway, the barring of chokes is what makes catch wrestling really excellent, and that's why we have so many alternative techniques to chokes, right? So, and my lineage is the direct lineage from Farmer Burns back to Wigan, right? So you can't get any more legit, right? I, I, I'd, you just can't, right? Right? So, yeah. So keep on asking me about my lineage because, um, you know, you just can't get more legit. Um, okay, and so yeah, so but basically all the students know chokes. I mean, you everyone knows chokes, especially in this environment today, right? A lot of people watch MMA or jiu-jitsu stuff, so everyone knows uh, chokes. And basically, in catch wrestling competition, you can still grab around the neck, but you have to have an arm in. So it's like an arm in. We call it an arm in headlock or just a headlock, really. And the only things that would be barred in particular would be rear naked choke, guillotine, and then I guess a bulldog choke. So these three things that are barred. So making a big deal out of it is ridiculous. It is probably someone who wants to rip you off saying, "Oh, you can do chokes," and then when you look at a lot of catch wrestling competition or catch wrestling competitions where they allow chokes, it just turns into a jiu-jitsu match. Um, so, any other questions? I do want to kind of talk about this. Like we have our Black Friday sale going on for one of our programs because kind of brought up MMA for a second there. So we did combine some catch wrestling with some sanda. So basically, what that means is we show you how to catch a lot of the strikes right in MMA. So a lot of the kicks. Um, So different type, roundhouse kick, front kick, side kick, how to catch them, get the takedown, and follow through with the submission or getting to past the legs or leg lock, right? So that is why we say like it's a sanda, so Chinese kickboxing, or which is called sanda, or some people call it sanshou or wushu sanda. Um, because they're so similar, right? But the sanda is all about striking. It's a kickboxing style that has a lot of wrestling takedowns. So it has a lot of the same, almost exactly the same takedowns as catch wrestling. So they combine perfectly. But in sanda, if you take someone down, then that's where the fighting stops, and you both are let back up. So that's why you need to combine the sanda with the catch wrestling to get the follow through. So that's what we did in one of our programs that we have a 50% off sale on our website, catchwrestlingalliance.com. You can get that there. You just look up on our Catch Wrestling CWA Academy. Right, so just click on that link, and then you'll see, I think it is labeled Black Friday sale. You can also learn the real thing, real catch wrestling from the CWA Academy. That's a monthly program where it's progressive. So you have to learn a lot of the fundamentals, and then you film yourself doing them, and you show it to me, right? And then I approve it or not, and then you can get access to more advanced lessons, right? So that's how that works, right? So that would be a continuous thing, but then what we're offering right now um, for Black Friday is the Sanda and catch wrestling combination class. It's specifically for MMA because in catch wrestling we don't do kicks, right? There punches and kicks. All right. Any other questions? Go ahead and continue asking. The other thing that we want to say is like if you want to support our channel, um, then we have even the minimal amount of support on YouTube is like it's like $1.99 a month or whatever. So you can click below this video and it says join. There you can join. We also have like a different tiers. So the third tier is we call it super student. So if you do that, then you get access to all the additional videos that we have behind the paywall on this channel. So we've done a bunch of different um, like in Humboldt, Iowa, we did this really cool exhibition right in public where we were in the park where Frank Gotch trained. So Farmer Burns had been there, Frank Gotch trained there, and we did after basically 100 years. We were back in that same park where thousands of people used to gather to watch Frank Gotch train, and we did a presentation for the people there of Humboldt, Iowa, showing them like catch wrestling moves, right? So wrestling is huge in Iowa, but it's still not catch wrestling, right? The folk style wrestling and freestyle wrestling has evolved from catch wrestling, but it's evolved really far from it. So we were showing them some of the leg locks and a bunch of different moves. So a bunch of different cool videos like that are accessible if you join. So you have to join at the medium tier or above, and the super student tier you get access to those videos plus our academy. So you can learn continuously and then become an affiliate or basically an authentic catch wrestler because I know authentic catch wrestling coaches are not all around the world. It's very, very rare. All right. Any other questions? Okay, so we'll have all the links below in the description box. All right, so I think we'll go ahead and call it a day if you guys aren't asking. Keep on asking. I'll give you a couple more seconds. All right, so we'll go ahead and maybe call it a day here. All right. So thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Yeah, we're also available on the podcast. So you can look us up on podcast if you just want to hear the audio. All right. Thanks again.